Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. Story number 1. This happened last year. So for some pretext, my parents live in a nice neighborhood in a pretty nice house. The street their house is on dead ends into our driveway, which goes behind the house. There are not any other houses behind or near, because it is surrounded by 13 acres of woods. In short, the backside of the house is completely hidden from the rest of the world. Every now and then, people pull all the way into our driveway, as they either don't realize the road dead ends, or they are trying to turn around. It's pretty annoying, but it's never bothered us too much. Anyways, one evening I was eating a late dinner at the house with my girlfriend. It was probably 9:30 p.m. because my ex and I had both just got off work. We were planning on eating dinner together, but I offered to bring some food back for my mom because my dad was out of town. We were the only ones home that night because my sister was out of town with some friends. It was a pretty gloomy night, and it was incredibly dark and quiet outside. We were sitting at our kitchen table eating, and out the window we saw an old beat-up sedan pull into our driveway and go right up to the side of the house. We figured whoever it was just lost or turning around as usual. But after 5 minutes of the car still being there, it became a little unsettling. We talked amongst ourselves and tried to figure out if it could be someone that we knew. Not a single person came to mind. There was literally no one that we knew that would show up unannounced at 9:30 at night in a car we'd never seen. I peeked out the window to try and see who it was. Sitting in the car, I saw a thin man, probably in his mid-30s, wearing very dark and worn clothes, with a face covered almost entirely in black tattoos. He was just sitting there completely silent, by himself, looking at the house. I watched him for a minute or so, and began to get really eerie feeling. Something was just off about this man. By now he had been in our driveway for almost 10 minutes, not moving, not on the phone, just staring at our house. I decided at this point I should probably do something, so I told my mom and ex-girlfriend to just stay at the table, and I walked out on the balcony overlooking the driveway, with 2 very large dogs in tow. The man didn't panic when he saw me. He didn't roll down his window to talk to me. He didn't leave our driveway. He just stopped looking at the house and stared directly at me. We stared at each other for about 20 of the most incredibly uncomfortable seconds of my life. It felt like an eternity. It was getting even darker outside, and it was still silent besides a few crickets occasionally chirping. I know it sounds stupid, but even without the guy looking creepy and wearing all black clothing, something about him just wasn't right. Now, being even more nervous about this guy, I motioned for him to roll down his window. He rolled it down. I asked him what he was doing. The only 2 words he said to me were, "I'm hiding." My entire body got immense chills. I somehow managed to muster the words, I'm sorry, but you can't hide here." We stared at each other for probably another 30 seconds before I told him that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. He didn't react at all, just sat in his car not moving, staring at me. I went back inside and told my mom to phone the police, and went and grabbed my dad's 12 gauge. While we were all hustling around trying to figure out what to do, my ex-girlfriend looked back out the window, and he was gone. We didn't hear him leave, didn't see any lights. He just all of a sudden left without showing any prior attention to do so. The entire situation was just bizarre and unsettling. My mom, already on the phone with the police, told them he'd left, and they'd said they'd send a cruiser to drive around our neighborhood and keep an eye out. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in our family room with a shotgun in my lap until the sun came up. I still to this day don't know what the guy was doing or why he pulled into our driveway. I'm not sure if he somehow knew my dad was out of town and thought my 50-year-old mother, 16-year-old sister were home alone. The scary thing is that my mom would have been alone if I hadn't decided to offer to eat dinner with her. I don't know if he was scoping out the place for a robbery, or if he was actually telling the truth and was hiding from someone. I have no idea who he would have been hiding from and why he was doing so in our driveway. I also don't know why the guy was so damned cold and eerie. Story number 2. First, the setup of my childhood home. It's a cabin in seemingly wilderness, except that the private driveway leads to a pretty active highway, and there is a bar overlooking part of our land and home. It's the back of the restaurant, but you can see the upper and lower parking lot from different areas on our property. My family used to own it, so this made sense at the time, but made for an unfavorable living situation as it changed hands. Very private, very isolated. Normally it was just noise from the bar and not a huge deal. However, one instant was so much more serious. Before the events took place, I'd spent a lot of time outside. I was an outdoorsy kid, about 12 or 13 at this time, and liked to be alone. I spent time in the surrounding woods, taking pictures and exploring. My mother always recounts how I was never afraid, till one day I started coming back and complaining that I felt like I was being watched. I had no reason to believe this to be true. I hadn't seen or heard anything. I just found myself jerking to look over my shoulder at the corners of our property every so often. It was spooky. I started going outside less and less each day. In this home, we always had a lot of animals, particularly dogs. One night they were just going crazy. Sometimes deer or other wildlife get too close to the fence and set them off. But tonight they went on for a while. My mother decided to drive the car up the driveway and see if possibly there was a predator lurking around, possibly stalking our dogs. Halfway up the driveway, though, she saw 2 men standing in the grassy area of our yard, about 100 yards from our home. My mom, being the woman she is, sped after them. She tried to cut them off at the bend in the driveway, but they got into the brush first, scrambling up back towards the restaurant. My mom called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no one left in the lower lot. The police followed up the next morning. They checked out where they had scrambled up the hill. They said there was a well-worn human-made path leading from the back parking lot directly to our driveway. They said it had to have been used for quite a while to be that worn. Nothing ever came of this, and they never came back as far as we know. The bar changed hands again, and it's now a younger crowd and we worry less. But thinking back to how I complained about feeling watched for weeks before the incident, about how I wandered in the woods alone, frightens me deeply. Part of me wants to believe it was my father's friends checking on us for him, as he wasn't allowed to be around us. Part of me knows that more than likely, that isn't the case. Story number 3. Ever since I was young, I've had a terrible fear of being around windows after dark. It always starts out as an uneasy feeling, a queasiness that I cannot suppress. Then comes the hyper-awareness. I'm not cognizant of it, but I can suddenly hear every little sound. The fear moves into my lungs, burning, but my fingers are numb with cold, and I'm frozen in place. The fear is surging through my veins and oozing from my pores. The small hairs on the back of my neck begin to stand up, and I feel the need to run. Suddenly I'm standing in the kitchen drinking a glass of water, reassuring myself that there's nothing to fear. This isn't a one-time thing. I'm 25 years old and I still lose my shit every time I'm near a window without blinds after dark. I've tried to overcome my fear, but at this point I've just chalked it up to being a quirk. As a child, I was never afraid of the dark or monsters under my bed. In fact, in order to avoid the windows, I would often sleep under my bed to the detriment of my parents, who would check on me and go into full-blown panic when they thought I'd been kidnapped. I was an independent child, so I never told them about this fear, until recently. My mother and I had been talking about spooky things. I love when she tells us her ghost stories, especially because these times are few and far between, but every now and then I get lucky. I do so enjoy the creepy and paranormal, so in the heat of the moment, I told my mother that I hadn't really experienced any ghosts, but that I'd had some weird dreams and this strange fear of windows at night. Boy, do I wish the ghost stories had continued. My mother looked me dead in the face and paused for a moment before responding. When you were little, we hadn't put blinds on the windows. The trees in the front were thick enough that a passing car couldn't see through it. One night we got a call from Annette and Mike from church. They were driving home from Bible study, and when they passed by, they said their headlights illuminated a man standing in the woods near the street watching you through your window. They called us when they arrived home, and we immediately called the police, but the man was gone by the time the police had arrived. We never told you because we didn't want you to be scared. Story number 4. This happened to me the first week of my freshman year of high school. I always walked to school since 7th grade, never had an issue. I lived in apartments in what is considered a very safe and quiet neighborhood. I always took the same route to and from school every day. When I leave the apartment and I got to the end of the road, I would take a right and walk in front of about 20 houses, 10 on each side of the street. Then I'd take a left up a hill and pass some more. I woke up at 5:50 a.m. like any other day and got ready and headed out at 6:25. It was chilly outside and I felt regret as I left wearing my thin hoodie, but didn't have time to turn back. It was very quiet outside, no one in sight, and only 2 cars passed by. I got to the end of the road and turned right, and as I did, I saw a jogger across the street. I didn't think much of it and just assumed he was going to cross over and jog past me, so I kept walking until I heard a semi-fast running behind me. I simply assumed it was a jogger about to pass by. I moved from the center of the sidewalk more into the grass and slowed down to let him have the middle. I never looked back, and the close approaching footsteps suddenly stopped close by. Assuming he had decided to turn the other way, I walked back into the middle of the path. Suddenly I hear the running again, and then it stops. Not just quickly, but right behind me. I again didn't give it much mind, until I felt warmth. I could feel the hairs on my neck standing straight up. I didn't have to look back to know it was a jogger, only a finger-length distance behind me. All of a sudden the world disappeared around me. My heart pounded as I kept walking, and he kept pace, never getting further from me. My body went into auto mode, but inside I was frozen. I felt nauseous as the smell of cold air mixed with his scent. I wanted to turn around and tell him to fuck off, or just run, but I couldn't. I was only 5'2" and 115 pounds, and this man towered over me. My eyes were fixed forward, and all I could hear was my pounding heart and his heavy breathing. I was waiting to feel his arms reach out to grab me, since at this point we were almost touching. I kept praying that a car or person would pass by, but nothing. After what felt like hours, but probably only 5 minutes, I started paying attention to my surroundings, and my eyes widened as my heart drops to my feet. Up ahead there was part of the sidewalk blocked by a big white van and a large hanging tree. I wanted to cry out, but every time I opened my mouth, nothing came out. What is he going to do? Am I going to be taken? Please, God, help. Will no one ever see me again? All these thoughts and more raced through my head. Just as I was 7 feet from the van, I felt the warmth leave and the air clear. It felt like I was holding my breath the whole time and finally could breathe. Just as I was going to pass the van, I heard a voice. "Bunny noodles, bunny noodles." My friend yelled and waved happily. She ran over smiling. "Who was that?" I looked at her with a blank face and said I have no clue. Her smile dropped, and she had to explain that she had seen the whole thing and assumed we knew each other and were speaking. Then she dropped the bomb. She said he walked away from me and headed towards a house while continuing to glance at me, and suddenly spun on his heel and was walking quickly towards me again. Just as he was about to reach out, he noticed her and turned around and went inside a house. We both stayed quiet the rest of the walk as the severity of the situation sunk in. I'm in my senior year now, and I still feel sick every time I think about what would have happened if she wasn't there. Story number 5. This may not be really scary, but it's creepy to me, and I want to thank God that I'm still here today. I've always had this vivid memory of me. I was maybe 3 or 4 years old at the time. My dad had left me in the car to quickly grab something out of a store. I remember seeing this old white guy with long, untamed, and dirty blonde hair. He was skinny, especially in the face. Now, he approached the car window and instantly tried to jerk open the car door. He was frantically trying to open the door. I remember this because it confused the hell out of me. I remember him running away, and then seconds later, my dad came into the car and we left. I didn't tell him, probably because I had no idea what was going on. But when I got older, I realized the scary and horrifying truth. He was trying to kidnap me, and I just want to thank God that it never happened. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. I hope everyone's weekends have been amazing. Be sure to send your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I will leave the link to my email in the info box below as well. Until we meet again, stay sinful.